Last class, we have seen about this sensory tracts, the various sensory tracts which carries with various modalities of sensations like touch, pressure, pain, temperature, vibration, proprioception, kinesthetic movement. So we have seen the various tracts like tract of dorsal column tract, spinothalamic tract, spinocerebellar tract, and what are its functions and what is the effect of lesion of this tract. So today we will move on to the motor areas and descending tracts. So motor areas and descending tracts are basically controlled in the cerebral cortex. So the part of the cerebral cortex, especially the frontal lobe, which has got this motor area, premotor area, or premotor complex, frontal eye field area, association areas, suppressor areas, which governs the control of skeletal muscle responses or voluntary movements so the motor and sensory areas are localized in discrete cortical areas called as domain. Not only it is governed with this voluntary movements control, even some higher mental functions such as learning and memory are also being controlled by this cerebral cortex. So inside these various lobes, there are various areas, what we call it a Brodmann's areas. So cerebral cortex has three types of functional areas: motor area, sensory area, and association areas. So each hemisphere is chiefly concerned with sensory and motor function of opposite side of the body. So this point is very important, which you must know. It is not ipsilateral side. So it is lateral side of the body. So what are the motor areas? What we call it a Brodmann's areas. So the primary area is the primary motor area, which is area number 4. So this occupies almost whole length of what you call it as precentral gyrus. A small portion also is there, what you call it as supplementary motor areas. And this motor area for the origin of the pyramidal tract. So your major fibers of pyramidal tract arise from this motor area, primary motor area, which is area number 4, which is located in precentral gyrus of frontal lobe. So inside this primary, which give rise to the pyramidal tracts. So pyramidal tracts, apart from, so pyramidal tracts are the motor tracts. So they are the descending tracts. So descending tracts, they are the corticospinal tract and corticobulbar tracts. So they are the longest tract which are arising from the motor cortex, and they reach the last segment of spinal cord. Like pyramidal corticospinal tract is further divided into lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract. So here you can see the cross section of spinal cord. On one side, you can see the ascending tracts, which we already discussed, sensory tracts. The other side, you can see the descending tracts or motor tracts. Generally, motor tracts are divided into pyramidal and extrapyramidal tract. Your pyramidal tracts are your corticospinal tract, extrapyramidal are your rubrospinal, tectospinal, olivospinal, vestibulospinal, and so on. So they like the sensory homunculus. Here also there is what you call it as motor homunculus. So this is a representation of your body, which is in an upside down fashion. So this representation is something very much similar to the sensory cortex representation present in the post-central gyrus. So one thing you can see from this representation is this is proportion to the skill with which the part is used, especially for fine and voluntary movements. The larger representation for the hands are there, larger representation for face is there, and so on. And whereas the face, larynx, vocal cord, and muscles for closing jaw are bilaterally represented, a separate foci exists for each of these finger. The is almost inferior, and that is for little finger, it is superior. So this is what we call it as motor homunculus. So same thing, motor innervation is contralateral. Sorry, for example, left primary motor controls right side of the body. So damage to the localized area of primary motor cortex paralyzes the muscles that controlled by that particular area. The manifestation will be on the left side. So there is one more area apart from this primary motor area, which was area number 4. One more area, what we call it a premotor area, which is area number 6. So this area controls motor skill of repetitive or patterned nature. For example, you are playing a piano or typing the keyboard on a PC. Like apart from that, it coordinates the movement of several group muscles to act simultaneously to the primary motor area, and also influence the motor activity more directly by supplying 15% of pyramidal tract fibers. So as I told, majority of pyramidal tract fibers arise from primary motor area and 15% arise from premotor area. So they are also involved in motor planning. So damage to the premotor area results. So the neurons relearning the skill would require the practice. So this is what you call Broca's area. So even Broca's area is also part of motor cortex. So this is a speech area. Frontal eye field area. So these frontal eye field area, generally they are present in the middle frontal gyrus anterior to area number 6. What is the function of this? Stimulation of this frontal eye field area causes conjugate deviation of the eye to the opposite side. So you can see here descending pathway from the motor cortex. Descending tracts. So descending tracts are otherwise also called as motor tracts. So here, so these descending tracts can be like these arise from the cerebral cortex, and there are two types of descending tracts: pyramidal tracts and extrapyramidal tract. Clinically, these two tracts are considered together because these two tracts are different. So these descending tracts are of two types: pyramidal tract and extrapyramidal tract. So in the today's class, we will look into the pyramidal tracts. So pyramidal tracts are uh, corticospinal tract and corticobulbar tracts. So pyramidal tracts deliver efferent impulse from the brain to spinal cord. So there are two tracts, direct fiber tracts and indirect fiber tracts. So direct fiber tracts pathway involves two neurons, upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. So you need to know about the difference between the upper motor neuron palsy and lower motor neuron palsy. So the pyramidal tracts, they generally arise or originate from the pyramidal neurons in the primary motor area, majority of fibers. So the impulse are sent through the corticospinal tract and they synapse on the uh, this is the what you call it the main pathway, what you call corticospinal tract. The pyramidal tract fibers, which is getting synapse in the spinal ventral horn cells, they constitute corticospinal tract. Whereas pyramidal tract fibers, which is arising from cerebral cortex, they synapse to the motor cranial nuclei. So they constitute what you call it as corticobulbar tract or corticonuclear tract. So these pyramidal tracts, they in the various cranial nerve nuclei. Like so, basically, pyramidal tracts are two tracts. The main is the corticospinal tract. The second few fibers forms corticobulbar tracts, which is supplying to the cranial nerve nuclei. So, what is the function of this direct fibers or pathway for fine skilled movements? So here you can see, like are the pyramidal tract. So generally, if you look at the origin, 30% of pyramidal tract fiber arise from motor area number 4 and another 30% from the area number 6 and remaining 40% from the somatosensory area and adjacent parietal lobe area. So what is the course of the pyramidal tract? So the pyramidal tract fibers which arise from cerebral cortex stem as a radiating mass of fibers known as corona radiata to reach the internal capsule. So inside the internal capsule, so this pyramidal tract occupy the genu, they occupy in between the genu and the anterior two-thirds of posterior limb of the internal capsule. Representation of your body upside down. Inside the internal capsule also, there is a point-to-point discrimination in the internal capsule. So the fibers concerned with control uh, of head, shoulder, elbow, wrist, fingers, trunk, hip, knee, toe are arranged from anterior to after it is crossing through the internal capsule, it enters into the midbrain. So inside the midbrain, it occupies middle 3/5 of the region in the midbrain, and then it enters into the pons. So inside the pons, they occupy most ventral aspect in the front of trapezium while passing through the pons. Broken up into series of shattered bundle, and in the midbrain pons there is a well marked localization of pyramidal fibers for different parts of the body. And from there, the shattered bundle, corticospinal tract, next it enters into the medulla. Of anterior part of medulla forming a structure like a pyramid. So hence it is called as pyramidal tract. So what will happen after medulla, the pathway? In the lower part of the medulla, 80 to 85% of fibers cross to opposite side and enters the lateral white column and descend down as lateral corticospinal tract or crossed pyramidal tract. So whereas 15 to 20% of fibers do not cross, they enter the anterior white column near the medial pathways are old, whereas the lateral pathways are new. So throughout the brainstem, the cortical bulbar fibers are crossing to reach the motor cranial nucleus of opposite side. So these are the pathway of the pyramidal tract. So as takes place in the lower part of medulla. So in the lower part of medulla, as I told, 80 to 85% of fibers cross to opposite side and they descend as lateral corticospinal tract or crossed pyramidal tract, whereas 15 to 20% of fibers do not cross and they enters in the anterior white column and they are called So you can see here the whatever I told, the pathway of corticospinal tract. It arises from the cerebral cortex. It forms corona radiata. It enters into the internal capsule. From the internal capsule, it enters into the midbrain. So inside this pons, this tract is broken up into series of scattered bundle by the nucleus pontine, and next it enters into the medulla, where this shattered corticospinal tract reunite and they form a thick bundle occupying the anterior aspect of medulla and are shaped like a pyramid. Hence, it is called pyramidal tract. At the lower part of medulla, 80 to 85% of fiber cross. We call it as lateral corticospinal tract. 15 to 20% of they do not cross. We call it as anterior spinothalamic tract. So whatever it is, ultimately, irrespective of it's a lateral corticospinal tract or anterior corticospinal tract, they end on the anterior horn cells. End on the end on the anterior horn cells of opposite side. As a rule, the direct pyramidal tract does not extend beyond the lower cervical or mid-thoracic level. So of all the pyramidal fibers, 55% fibers end in cervical region, 20% end in thoracic region, 25% end in lumbosacral region. So the most commonest site of lesion to the pyramidal tract is seen at the internal capsule level, which we'll study later. So this is the pathway of the corticospinal tract. The next tract, as I told, pyramidal tract is of two types, corticospinal and corticobulbar. So here the cortical projection ends to either red nucleus to the reticular formation, and they project to the various cranial nerve nuclei, to fifth cranial nerve, seventh cranial nerve, ninth cranial nerve, 10th cranial nerve, and 12th cranial nerve. 12th cranial nerve, like So you can see here bilaterally to the fifth, seventh, and ambiguous, contralateral, 12th and 12th cranial nerve. Like so, what is the basically these corticobulbar fibers end near the motor neurons that innervates the muscles of eye, face, tongue, and throat. Uh, So these fibers are the main source of control of voluntary muscles of the head and neck. So the remaining tract originate in the different subcortical motor nuclei of brainstem and extrapyramidal tract. So basically, uh, descending tracts are pyramidal and extrapyramidal. So pyramidal tract is further divided into corticospinal and corticobulbar. And extrapyramidal we'll see in the next class. So what is the difference between corticospinal and corticobulbar? So corticospinal and corticobulbar. Corticospinal, they arise from motor cortex and they synapse in the lower motor neuron, whereas corticobulbar, it arises from motor cortex and they synapse in the various cranial nerve nuclei present in the pons and medulla. Like, so what is the difference? One very important Viva question generally they ask. What is the difference between the medial and lateral motor pathway? Like, so lateral means it's the one is, we'll see this later. Like, so difference between, that is the thing I'm trying to tell, the pyramidal tract and extrapyramidal tract. So similarities and differences. So similarity between the pyramidal and extrapyramidal, both are motor fiber descending fibers, which is passing to the spinal cord or to the brain stems. What is the difference between pyramidal and extrapyramidal? So pyramidal is the like more of phylogenetically newer system, extrapyramidal older. In terms of origin, the pyramidal tract or origin mostly from the area number 4, 6, whereas extrapyramidal originate mainly from area number 6 of cerebral cortex as well as from the subcortical structures like red nucleus, vestibular nucleus, tactile nucleus, olivary nucleus, reticular nucleus. And these is predominantly under cortical pyramidal tract, whereas extrapyramidal tract is predominantly controlled by basal ganglia and cerebellum. Pyramidal tract are involved mainly for skilled voluntary movements of hand and finger, whereas extrapyramidal controls the posture and axial movements. So the lesion of pyramidal tract causes decrease in muscle tone. Lesion of extrapyramidal causes spasticity or rigidity. Like, so this is the difference you need to know. Very important from the Viva point of view. So our short answer, difference between the pyramidal tract and the extrapyramidal tract. Like, so what is upper motor neuron? What is lower motor neuron? So basically upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron are important even from exam point of view also, because they the lesion is important. So you need to know the difference between upper motor neuron palsy and lower motor neuron palsy. So the pyramidal cells and tracts constitute upper motor neuron, whereas the spinal and cranial motor neurons, which innervates the muscle, constitute the lower motor neuron. So the upper motor neurons are the motor neurons that originate in the motor region of cerebral cortex or brainstem and carry motor information down to the pathway. So lower motor neurons are the alpha motor neuron and gamma motor neuron. So these lower motor neurons are the only neurons that innervates the skeletal muscle fiber, and they function as the common final pathway. That's the link between CNS and the skeletal muscles. So you can see in this diagram, there's an upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron, and there's a final common pathway. So you can see there are two sides. One side is the pyramidal fiber tract, the other side is the extrapyramidal fibers. So what I'm trying to tell is the other thing which you need to know in the pyramidal tract, very important, the definition we saw, the pyramidal fiber tract. So pyramidal tract is corticospinal tract and corticobulbar tract. So what is the effect of lesion? Effect of lesion. So as I told, generally the commonest site of lesion of pyramidal tract is seen in, so either due to a thrombosis or a hemorrhage of lenticulostriate artery, which is a branch of middle cerebellar artery. So in this region, and this is the most commonest site of lesion is internal capsule. And generally, patient can present with, depending upon where the lesion, he can present with either hemiplegia or a paraplegia or a quadriplegia or a monoplegia. What is hemiplegia? So hemiplegia means paralysis of one side of body, generally injury of pyramidal tract at internal capsule level. Whereas paraplegia means paralysis of both lower limb. Whenever there is an injury of pyramidal tract at the brain stem level. Whereas quadriplegia means paralysis of all the four limbs, all the four limbs. So this is what you call quadriplegia. Generally, this occurs whenever there is an injury of pyramidal tract at the brain stem level. The last is the monoplegia, means paralysis of one limb. Whenever there is a damage or injury to area number 4, there is monoplegia. So these four terminologies you need to know: hemiplegia, paraplegia, quadriplegia, monoplegia. Like, now coming to the functions of pyramidal tract. So what is these functions of pyramidal tract? The main functions of this corticospinal tract, uh, or this corticospinal tract, we told, like, divided into lateral corticospinal tract, anterior corticospinal tract. So lateral corticospinal tract are mainly control the voluntary movements, especially fine, precise movements of fingers, hand to carry out the most skilled work. Whereas the anterior corticospinal tract are concerned with control of muscles of trunk and the postural adjustment and some sort of gross movements. Apart from that, so these pyramidal tract, they also form part of pathway for superficial reflex. You know what is superficial reflex? So reflexes are classified into deep reflex, superficial reflex. So the superficial reflex are the cremastic reflex, abdominal reflex, plantar reflex. So some corticospinal tract end at excitatory synapse on alpha, gamma neurons, whereas other ends on the inhibitory, on the interneurons that can either excite or inhibit the alpha motor neurons. So the effect of corticospinal tract on the alpha motor neuron may be inhibitory or excitatory. So these are some of the uh, functions. So the other important function is corticospinal tract, which are arising from somatosensory areas. So they are with sensory motor coordination. For example, aiming of an hand towards an object, or head high head eye coordination. So you need to have this fibers very much intact. Now coming to the upper motor neuron lesion and lower motor neuron lesion. So we have seen the difference between the pyramidal and extrapyramidal tract. And coming to the upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron lesion. So you know what is upper motor neuron lesion and lower motor neuron lesion. So upper motor neuron lesion means it's a lesion of upper motor neuron, that is the neurons in the brain and spinal cord. So that can influence the activity of lower motor neurons. So basically, it's a lesion of pyramidal tracts, upper motor. Lower motor means it's a lesion of lower motor neurons, that is the spinal, the cranial motor neurons that's supplying to the skeletal muscles. What type of paralysis generally? Upper motor type of lesion, generally they have spastic type of paralysis. So these affected muscles become hypertonic. Upper motor hypertonic, there is spastic paralysis. Why there is a spastic paralysis here in upper motor neuron lesion? Because of one is release phenomena. So there will be loss of higher inhibitory control. Number two, there will be denervation hypersensitivity of transaction. Because of these two causes, there will be spastic paralysis in upper motor neuron lesion. Whereas lower motor neuron lesion, there will be flaccid paralysis. This is due to complete loss of muscle tone. This is due to complete loss of muscle tone. Apart from that, there will be disuse atrophy in the lower motor neuron, whereas upper motor neuron, there will be muscle atrophy is not very much severe. So what will happen to the reflexes? So all reflexes will be absent in neuron lesion, whereas upper motor neuron lesion, so deep reflexes will become exaggerated, hyperactive because of increased gamma motor discharge, whereas superficial reflexes are lost. The other most important is the Babinski sign. So Babinski sign is positive in upper motor neuron lesion, whereas lower motor neuron lesion, like Babinski sign cannot be elicited. So what is this Babinski sign? In upper motor neuron lesion, if you are stroking the outer edge of sole of foot with a firm tactile object or stimuli, so there will be a dorsiflexion of great toe and fanning of all this small toe. So this is what we call it as Babinski sign. So anatomists misleadingly call it as extensor response, but physiologically it is a flexor response or a withdrawal response. So Babinski sign, if once become positive, will remain positive to. So what are the causes of positive Babinski sign? Generally in infants less than 1 year of age, because in these infants still the pyramidal tracts are not developed until the child start walking, the Babinski sign is positive. Or second, whenever a person is in deep sleep. Third, whenever there's an inhibition of pyramidal tract. The fourth, change stroke breathing due to hypoxia. So these are the causes of positive Babinski sign. Like in which circumstances you see a positive Babinski sign. Of course, Babinski sign is seen pathologically in upper motor neuron lesion. The other cause is in